This is 9 News with Peter Overton.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this 9 News special edition on the search for Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. This afternoon, a potentially major breakthrough. Satellite images showing two objects that could be parts of the missing Boeing 777 about 2,500 kilometres off the Western Australian coast. Search aircraft from our Air Force and ships, including a warship, are on their way, while in the last hour a Norwegian merchant ship reached the area. At the moment, low cloud is hampering the challenging task of spotting the debris from the air. Tonight, we're on board one of the Australian Air Force Orion scouring the Indian Ocean. We'll be live to Kuala Lumpur and Beijing as relatives react to this latest development. And we'll get the latest update from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority in Canberra. Plus, the experts tell us what would need to be done to recover the wreckage. First, though, Jane Azzopardi has the story of the day so far.
Even the searchers themselves describe these as no more than blobs. But the grainy black and white images could hold the key to the aviation mystery that's had the world scratching its head and 239 families living the worst kind of limbo for nearly 2 weeks. It was our Prime Minister who broke the news.
New and credible information has come to light in relation to the search for Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 in the southern Indian Ocean.
For 17 minutes this afternoon, the eyes of the world focused on Canberra, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority at the forefront of the global hunt for answers.
AMSA's Rescue Coordination Centre Australia has received satellite imagery of objects possibly related to the search.
The objects were spotted in the southern Indian Ocean, 2,500 kilometres from the coast of Western Australia. A 4-hour flight from Perth, an Orion aircraft scrambled to what was potentially the crash zone, but weather was not on their side.
The information that there is poor visibility in the area, there have been no sightings yet.
They're hunting for debris, and while it sounds large, it will be just a speck in the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean.
The largest image that I've seen is assessed as being 24 metres. There's another one that's smaller than that, and a number of other images in the general area of the biggest one.
Commercial satellites are now being accessed and directed at the search area, homing in, trying to get a better view for analysts.
The imagery is being progressively captured by satellites passing over various areas. The task of analysing imagery is quite difficult. It requires drawing down frames and going through frame by frame.
An Orion aircraft was first on the scene about 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. It was followed an hour later by United States Navy P-8 Poseidon aircraft. Another RAAF Orion and one from New Zealand arrived later. A commercial ship that responded to the rescue call should be in the area now. HMAS Success is also en route, but it won't reach the search zone for a number of days. Our 9 News camera was on board the first Orion to reach the search zone. From the air, you can see just what they're up against. They've had to fly 4 hours just to get within reach of the search zone. There's enough fuel to fly for 2 more before they have to head back. They're looking out over the seemingly never-ending ocean. Low-lying cloud, a visibility barrier that threatens to mask what they're looking for. This aircraft had to return without sighting its target, but backup is on its way. A huge amount of international manpower is being thrown at this, and still there's no guarantees.
We must keep this in mind. The task of locating these objects will be extremely difficult, and it may turn out that they are not related to the search for flight MH370. Nevertheless, I did want to update the House on this potentially important development.
But after 12 days with little progress, this offers the first glimmer of hope for searchers, just as it dashes the hopes of those left behind.
This is a lead. It is probably the best lead we have right now, but we need to get there, find them, see them, assess them, to know whether it's really meaningful or not.
For families waiting for news in Kuala Lumpur, the lack of information before today was agony, the frustration palpable. But as the search enters this new phase, it seems many are clinging on to the faintest of hopes. This man says he needs proof that the debris is from the plane. As a father, he says, I still have to believe all the MH370 passengers are alive and well. I hope they're in good health. He and the hundreds of other family members of those missing passengers will have to endure their wait a little longer. Our Defence Minister says authorities should know something definite about those satellite blobs within 2 or 3 days. Moments after touching down in Papua New Guinea, Tony Abbott promised Australia would be throwing all the resources we can into finding those answers.
We will do everything we humanly can to try to get to the bottom of this. We don't know what that satellite saw until we can get a much better, much closer look at it. But this is the first tangible breakthrough in what up till now has been an utterly baffling mystery.
Jane Azzopardi, 9 News.
Well, the crews of the Royal Australian Air Force Orions have an extraordinarily difficult job searching thousands of kilometres of empty ocean for comparatively tiny specks of wreckage. 9 reporter Andrew Nelson was on board one of the aircraft involved in today's search.
This afternoon, this was the view from a P3 Orion. We're almost 3,000 kilometres southwest of Perth. The pictures from our cameras show that it's looking like a needle in a haystack. The search area spans 600,000 square kilometres and visibility is low. The problem, sea fog generated by the ocean. And on top of that, cloud cover, making it hard for the crew of 14 to see anything. The mission, to find any trace of MH370. The Orion left Pearce Air Base as the sun rose. It took 4 hours to reach the search zone with only enough fuel to search for 2 hours. 292 Squadron has been assigned to the search effort by the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. The aircraft's chief pilot, Christopher Birra, is guiding the P3 Orion across vast open waters. And in this remote stretch of the Indian Ocean, the dangers are real.
Yeah, very, very remote in the southwestern part of the Indian Ocean. Probably about 1,500 nautical miles to the southwest of Perth. So very remote and a very large, expansive area that we need to search.
The aircraft is equipped with state-of-the-art radar technology. Infrared cameras are also used to track objects in the water.
My role is to ensure that all the sensors that we have available are maximised to detect any debris, life rafts or any potential wreckage if we do come across it from the Malaysian Airlines flight that we are trying to locate.
While some crew are dedicated to using their eyes and an open window. The crew here have just finished a 2-hour search of the southern Indian Ocean, about 1,000 feet above sea level. Now, nothing was found and there was sea fog that was hampering visibility. But the crew will be back tomorrow and the search will continue. The Orion returned to Pearce Air Base after 11 hours in the sky, not able to find any signs of MH370. But the crew is confident they will find it if it's out there.
And Andrew Nelson joins us now from RAF Base Pearce in Western Australia. Andrew, good evening to you. You've spent the day, as we've just seen, in the air. What was it like being part of that search?
Well, Peter, it was quite overwhelming at times because, as you heard in that report, we were quite incredibly low towards the sea level there on the Indian Ocean, some 1,000 feet from sea level. So turbulence as well as visibility was incredibly low. So the crew were actually asking us to stay and remain in our seats during that time. Obviously, seasickness was a big issue for the crew, and even myself, it was a very big ask to have me on that aircraft at certain times. But to paint your viewers a picture tonight of exactly what it was like on there, you had 14 crew who were totally committed to this task. They know what's at stake. They know that we've had speculation, innuendo about a mystery that's nearly a fortnight without answers up until today. And today we saw nothing but a concentrated effort on a very remote part of the Indian Ocean. And now they've learned, as they've returned to RAF Base Pearce in the last couple of hours, that we could have a positive outcome on its way.
Andrew, you touched on it in your report. We saw the open window and looking with your eyes, but do they have other specialist equipment, whether that be cameras or binoculars, looking for this debris, looking for any sign of the flight?
Well, Peter, you're exactly right. There is plenty of state-of-the-art equipment on board the P3 Orion. And one piece of equipment that really did catch my eye today was the state-of-the-art radar that they use, which can actually detect debris. It can detect life rafts in the water. It can even detect marine life. Now, of course, that technology is responsible for a few false alarms. As you would probably be aware, the Indian Ocean has a lot of marine life crawling around there. So it did create a few false alarms today, but we were none the wiser that there was actually possible pieces of debris out in the Indian Ocean among that same stretch that we were across today. So obviously binoculars playing a big part, and peripheral vision, simply putting your eyes to an open window and having a look at what's out there. Unfortunately, Peter, visibility was so low because of cloud cover and extensive sea fog in that stretch of ocean.
All right, Andrew Nelson, thank you very much for giving us such a first-hand look at how the members of our Defence Forces are going about searching for this jet airliner. Thanks again, Andrew. Within the last couple of hours, the Malaysian government has just given its daily update. Reporter Laura Turner joins me live from Kuala Lumpur. Laura, what did they have to say today?
Good evening, Peter. Well, a lot of repetition in the press conference this afternoon as to what has come out of Australia already today. But what is apparent more and more as every day goes by is that Malaysian government really does appear to be on the back foot here. I mean, it may just be luck or circumstance that Australia has turned up what appears to be concrete evidence after just a few days of heavy involvement. But Malaysia again tonight suffered scathing criticism of their handling of this investigation and their handling of the passengers' families. We saw last night the Chinese relatives dragged out of the press conference room and taken into another room which was guarded by members of the police here. And this really did drag away a very forthright response from the minister involved here this evening. Have a listen.
I do feel for them, and I say that on record, and I say that to the world. We do care for them, and we can understand what they're going. We can try to understand what they're going through. But this is something that we'll be getting expert advice too.
Were you a little ashamed of the way they were treated?
Well, as AJ said just now, yesterday, we regret the actions that happened yesterday.
The other interesting thing that we can take out of the press of this evening, and it might be a hint as to their confidence in these satellite pictures from Australia, they did begin to discuss the search for the black box, saying that that is the next step and it will need to be a multinational effort. Peter?
OK, Laura Turner from KL, thank you very much. Let's go live now to Sky News reporter Jonathan Samuels, who's in Beijing. Jonathan, good evening to you. Give us a sense of the level of anger, if you like, in China.
Yeah, hi Pete. Well, we know that 2/3 of the passengers on board that flight are Chinese, and you know right from the start China has been scathing at how Malaysia has handled this whole operation. But the relatives here have been furious as well. Over the last 13 days we've seen them throw water bottles at airline officials. They've threatened to go on hunger strike. They've formed a committee to stand up for their own rights, can you believe? And then yesterday we saw those appalling scenes where two relatives were manhandled and shut away in a hotel room. So they are furious, they're still angry, and tomorrow a high-profile team from Kuala Lumpur is going to address many of those concerns. High-ranking officials from the government, from the airline, they're flying here tonight, and tomorrow they will face the relatives, and the relatives can ask whatever they want. And you know, over the last few days they've had so much misinformation, they've had so many contradictory statements. Now they simply don't know what to believe or who to believe.
All right, Jonathan Samuels from Sky News, thank you for joining us tonight from Beijing. The search has been coordinated, of course, from Canberra. 9 reporter Lane Cowcut joins me. Lane, hello to you. What information is coming from there tonight?
Hi Peter. Well, not much more than what they said this afternoon and what we've already reported this evening. Clearly AMSA will work through the night, hoping any more images that might come back from the search area will give some further evidence of what there is out there. The Prime Minister, as you heard, says everything will be thrown into the search to try to find out one way or the other if that is some of the wreckage of that plane, Peter.
OK, what I found interesting this afternoon, Lane, was that the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, actually put himself front and centre of this, making the announcement in Parliament. Does that suggest, do you think, some confidence in these satellite images? Yeah, it would appear so, Peter. Let me take you through what happened this afternoon. The Prime Minister
Prime Minister's office heard from AMSA around midday about this evidence, and given what AMSA told them, that the images were credible, and given what Tony Abbott has said in Moresby this evening, that it's the first possible tangible breakthrough, it was decided that the Malaysian Prime Minister should be told, so Tony Abbott rang him. And secondly, the office thought that the public had a right to know about this, so it was then that it was decided Tony Abbott should make the announcement or statement to the House. I'm told we shouldn't read too much into the fact that he did, although given again what he said in Port Moresby tonight, it's clear the evidence is pretty strong. Now, with the eyes of the world on Canberra, as you said, there's a lot to gain, but there's also a lot to lose, Peter, if this turns out to be nothing. His staff also point out that his tone this afternoon was quite cautious, and as I said, given the evidence from AMSA and that the media are actually on those planes searching out there, they decided to go ahead and make the statement to Parliament, Peter.
All right, good on you, Lane. Thank you very much for tonight. The search above the ocean is the easy part. The depths and darkness of the ocean pose a whole new host of challenges. But incredible submarine technology used to solve the mystery of Air France Flight 447 is on standby, ready to help.
A wheel, a wing, an engine and fuselage. These photos all the world needed to confirm the worst when the wreckage of Air France Flight 447 was found 3 years ago. They shed light on a 2-year-old mystery and on the dark floor of the ocean 4,000 metres deep, snapped by this.
Down under here, on the forward end.
A little yellow submarine tucked away in a quiet research centre in Massachusetts. Diving to depths of 6,000 metres, they remain underwater for up to 20 hours. Unmanned drones that scan an ocean floor too dark and too deep for any man to reach.
It scans out about 600 metres on either side of the vehicle. So it will go down a row, it will turn and come back down again on the other side. What it's doing is the side scan is running, and it looks out and is getting returns back from primarily hard objects that are on the bottom.
And above the crash site, a research team frantically analysing data.
All the rows in the mission are put together created a mosaic, and you can look at that and get an overall view of the bottom.
The photographic evidence these submarines prove is crucial for providing closure, but their purpose is greater. They could help find the aircraft's black box data and voice recorders, answering the greatest question of why.
You got our antennas, okay.
It took months to retrieve the wreckage of Air France off the coast of Brazil, even though there was a clear crash site strewn with debris. These experts know the mystery of MH370 is harder, but they're hoping and ready to help.
It's possible that we'll never find out what happened. I think there just are so many unknowns right now.
Davina Smith, 9 News.
Security expert Neil Fergus joins me now from Bangkok. Neil, good evening to you.
Good evening, Peter.
Neil, there's been doubt this afternoon whether these objects, this suspected debris, are in fact remains of the Boeing 777 aircraft from Malaysia Airlines. What are your thoughts on today's developments?
Well, at least it's a positive development, and AMSA, the Australian Maritime Authority, is actually seeming to be operating in a very well-structured and focused and planned manner. So while there are some doubts, because where the debris has been identified by satellite seems to be a little bit beyond the range of expectations, it is a tangible lead, and it's being followed up in what appears to be a very professional manner.
When you say it's beyond the realms of tangible expectations, are you basing that on the fact that, well, the last time we heard from them, they were at, say, 35,000 feet. That means they would have been cruising at a certain speed, which means the 777's fuel consumption would have been at a certain rate, and you can calculate where the plane could have reached in terms of running out of fuel and crashing?
That is what the experts working on the fuel data have projected to date, but there are so many uncertainties, of course, Peter, in terms of what happened to this flight, what fuel might have been expended, that there is a bit of a grey area. And the other thing, of course, is there has to be some datum buoys put down to determine what the current movements are like. And even on top of that, the analytics require some idea about the wind projections and conditions, because that will have influenced the spread or the movement of debris. So there's still a great deal of uncertainty, and this needs to be taken as a credible lead at this point in time.
OK, you're an aviation security expert. There's been many theories that have arisen in the past 12 days about why this plane went missing. What do you think happened to Flight 370?
If it turns out that this debris is the missing flight, it increases quite dramatically the likelihood of human intervention, which has gone, as you're well aware, over the last several days from one of the possibilities to one of the stronger possibilities, because technical engineering malfunction may have meant that the flight deck wasn't manned or wasn't controlled properly and it went somewhere well out of its course. But to be down there and having done the jinx that it has reportedly done according to radar readings over the Malay Peninsula, and then to have diverted onto that trajectory indicates somebody was at the flight deck for at least part of that journey. And that of course leads to the increased probability of human intervention on the flight deck.
OK, well, Neil, you're going to join us after the break with another panellist, another expert, to have a bit more of a chat. You're coming to us live from Bangkok. Stay there, we'll be back with you shortly. Up next, do today's developments shed any light on actually what happened on board the missing plane? We'll see you soon. Welcome back, everyone, to this 9 News special on the missing Malaysia Airlines jetliner. Now, there have been many theories about what happened on board the fateful flight. Earlier tonight, aviation expert Dick Smith spoke to Tracy Grimshaw on A Current Affair and explained what he thought was most likely.
If this is the crash site, and I keep prefacing that by saying if it is, because we keep being told this may not be debris from the flight. If it is, what can we conclude about how the plane that was bound for Beijing has ended up down in the Indian Ocean?
Well, what's happened before is aircraft that have claimed have had a depressurisation problem, and either from an explosion of, say, an oxygen cylinder where the pressurisation in the plane drops, the pilots and the passengers become unconscious and the plane can fly on. We had the famous golfer who flew right across America, if you remember, in the Learjet, Payne Stewart, and we've had in Australia a King Air that took off to go from Perth to the Goldfields and ended up in northwestern Queensland because there was a pressurisation problem. So that could be the reason that the plane has gone such a huge distance until it's run out of fuel.
If that was the case, wouldn't the plane fly straight? Why would it turn sharp left, then go across, then turn right, then turn left, then come all the way back down to the Indian Ocean
Absolutely.
again?
These are things
and go up to 45,000 feet and down to 26,000 and up to 35,000.
Absolutely. These are things we don't know, but there's a chance that the initial turn back was initiated by the pilots after, say, a catastrophic decompression, and then the plane, if it's on autopilot, can do some amazing things, especially if it's climbing and then it loses airspeed. People think if it stalls it's going to crash. No, the nose drops and it picks up airspeed again, and one wing could drop a bit, so it could turn and it could fly in a certain direction.
Dick Smith there with Tracy Grimshaw. Let's bring our panel of aviation experts into play now. I'm joined in our national newsroom by Desmond Ross and Neil Fergus, of course, from Bangkok. Good evening again to you, Neil, and welcome, Desmond. I want to go to you first, Desmond. I've seen you poring over maps on our computers in the newsroom. What have you been looking at and what have you been calculating?
Just considering the possibility that if this really is part of the aircraft, that something catastrophic, going back to my original thoughts, that something catastrophic could have occurred on board the aircraft when it was on its flight between KL and up to Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. Heading in that direction, something's happened. They've known they were in difficulties. They've started to turn the aircraft back to land either at KL or at some other airport in Malaysia, which they knew. And then something really bad has occurred such that the aircraft has continued flying without descending to land. It would have just continued on the route that was last set on the track it was last set on, until it ran out of fuel and ended up in the ocean. That to me could be an explanation for why we're now looking at debris in that particular location if the aircraft had just continued on a heading without manual control.
But when you look at now currents and winds and sea states, what have you thought about that in your calculations?
Oh, as a sailor also, most of us that spend any time in the ocean know that ocean currents can easily move at 3 to 5 knots a day, even higher sometimes. And if you calculate the fact that this has now been going on for 13 days, it means that any debris that has landed in the ocean could have drifted as much as between 930 to 1,600 nautical miles in that 13 days. So if we're finding some debris here in this location, we need to backtrack through the whatever currents they have in that part of the world to go that sort of distance and figure out whether or not there's more debris.
Desmond, thank you. Let's go to Neil Fergus in Bangkok. Neil, if they do indeed find wreckage in the Indian Ocean, can they, I suppose if it's a wing or it's part of the fuselage, is there any forensic analysis that they can do that might give them a hint as to what happened? Because this is the million-dollar question, what happened? And without a flight data recorder being recovered at this point, can wreckage indicate what happened?
Absolutely. In a number of previous terrorist attacks on aviation assets, the forensic examination of the hull, the fuselage and other flotsam and jetsam has been key. And one of the most famous cases, even though it was a long time ago now, Peter, is of course the Lockerbie experience, where a explosive device that had been placed on that plane blew it apart and the wreckage descended over northern Scotland. But by painstakingly putting that together, the air crash investigators were able to determine with absolute certainty that a bomb blast, not a engineering caused fire, had led to the catastrophic disruption of that flight.
Neil, I suspect that we're looking at ocean depths of great magnitude here, thousands and thousands of feet. Trying to retrieve a flight data recorder, or in general terms the black box, I mean, that could be beyond impossible.
Yes, and I was very interested, you referred earlier on, Peter, to the Air France catastrophe in the Atlantic, and they recovered that black box, if memory serves me, actually over the date that we expect the battery power to last in black boxes. They're normally about 30 days. And that is key to actually unravelling this mystery to an extent which puts to bed all of the conspiracy theorists, and of course gives some comfort to the families of the victims. At that particular depth in the Indian Ocean, if this wreckage turns out to be our missing Malaysian flight, it's going to be very difficult first to find it, because the sonar buoys they will need to get the signals emitted from the black box need to be put in relatively good proximity to the impact site. And then, of course, the challenge thereafter is to bring up the black boxes.
OK, Neil Fergus joining us tonight from Bangkok. Let's hope that they do indeed find these black boxes and shed once and for all some light on what happened to MH370. Thank you for your time, Desmond Ross. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That concludes our special on the missing Malaysian Airlines jetliner. Thanks so much for your company. I'm Peter Overton. On behalf of the 9 News team, good night.